I was live here at the Pitt facility. The football team is currently in practice. We're not allowed to view it, so we're out here taping our first Facebook Live practice chat here with PSN's Pitt beat writer Alan Saunders. Alan, I guess there was a newcomer to practice today. He's not a new name, but it's a big deal for Pitt as far as getting a big, experienced body on that offensive line.
Yeah, Brandon Hodges made his debut for Pitt at practice today. Graduate transfer from Texas. He's a big kid. Pat Narduzzi said he's going to play tackle, which is where he made some starts last season with Texas, originally out of the same community college as Cam Carter. And it's a big deal because Pitt doesn't have any experience as far as depth goes on the offensive line. They have four starters. Four players that have started before. Beyond that, they have a few snaps. That's it. So that gives them a legitimate depth option. They need someone to replace Alex Buchser at right guard for the first game against Youngstown State. So that means there's going to be two players that are going to get some starting experience as Pitt enters, I don't know, the real season or the rest of the season after Youngstown State. And that's good because they've been pretty fortunate the last couple of years as far as injuries go to the offensive line. Last season, they played pretty much with the same five guys throughout, but that's a position where injuries can pile up pretty quickly and things can go downhill in a hurry. So building that depth is going to be an important part of this training camp. So I think if you add Hodges, get some experience from maybe a guy like Justin Morgan at right tackle. Jimmy Morrissey is a walk-on who keeps getting mentioned as someone that could battle for playing time as a center. And Pat Narduzzi was also very complimentary of Tony Pilato, who's the backup left tackle. And that depth is really, building that depth, I think, is job number one for the offensive line in camp. And even in the beginning part of the season, the Youngstown State game, I still think there's a lot of things that are going to be figured out there in week one.
Another position that Pat Narduzzi mentioned today and player that he brought out was Alan Edwards at defensive end. Everyone knows Rory Blair is gone for the team. They need to find somebody opposite Dwayne Hendricks. How do you see the defensive ends position breaking down, or the battle going this camp? And I guess it's a good news that Narduzzi doesn't like to tip his hand or mention a lot of players during his presser, but he was complimentary of Edwards today.
Yeah, I think when he does bring somebody up, then I think it means something, right? Because he doesn't like to talk about a lot of individual players. He'd rather talk about the team. He brought up Edwards twice, actually, as a guy that not only has played pretty well, but has become something of a leader on that group where there aren't very many upperclassmen. He's got a lot of experience. Honestly, though, I think at defensive end, this camp doesn't mean as much maybe because there are three guys, really, Hendricks, Edwards, and James Folston, who have 90% of the experience of the defense, and all three are going to play a lot. So I wouldn't get caught up in who the starter is or the depth chart. I think all three of those guys are going to see a ton of reps. And, Edwards and Folston are smaller guys. Hendricks is a little bit bigger. So I'd expect, them to try to replace that Juan Price role of a pass rusher first. And we'll see what happens. Hendricks can rush the passer too. To me, the big thing is, with those ends, the ends have experience, at least a little bit. The tackles have almost none. And so, Juan Price was very successful because he got one-on-one matchups. If those ends can't get one-on-one matchups because the tackles aren't forcing people to double-team them, that's not going to be pretty no matter who plays them. So I think that the defensive line is going to need to be built from the inside out this camp. I think the ends, those three guys are all going to play. They're all going to play a lot. They have experience. So I wouldn't really worry about defensive end too much, even with the loss of Rory Blair.
Let's get to the position everyone likes to talk about, and that's quarterback. Since the start of camp, even pre-camp, Narduzzi has publicly stated that it's a battle. Max Brown, Ben DiNucci, and to a lesser extent Thomas McVitie. It's going to come down to either DiNucci or Brown. He says it's a battle. Are you buying that, or is Brown really going to have to underachieve during camp not to win the job?
I think it is a battle, but I don't think there's any way that Max Brown doesn't start against Youngstown State. But the real battle then becomes, can another quarterback do enough during camp and enough during the first couple weeks of practice that if Max Brown goes out there, and Youngstown State, honestly, how bad could he play against Youngstown State? Like that he wouldn't if he's going to start week 1, I think he's going to start week 1 because you don't bring in grad transfers and not play them, especially at that position. Pitt's had a lot of success with grad transfer quarterbacks in the past. They've gotten good grad transfer quarterbacks because of that, and you don't want to screw up that good thing. You go get one of the top grad transfer quarterbacks in the country, he's going to start week 1, almost no question, even if he doesn't earn it during camp, because you have to be able to go get that next grad transfer quarterback, and you have to be able to show him that you gave that guy a legitimate chance, and nothing's going to happen against Youngstown State unless there's an injury that's going to change that. So to me, it becomes, how does Max Brown play against Penn State in week 2, and how good does Ben DiNucci or someone else look between now and then, that if Brown doesn't play well against Penn State, do they then become a legitimate option week 3, maybe week 4, going down the line?
All right, last question here. The last question of Narduzzi's media get-together today was Jerry DePaula of the Trib brought up Paris Ford. What are you hearing, or what are you expecting from Paris Ford?
Well, he's still not here, and no update officially from the team. From what I've heard, I wouldn't expect anything this week, probably. And it's kind of, it's getting to the point where something needs to happen in the next week or two, or it's looking pretty bleak for him for this season. There are other options as far as, if he doesn't get eligible. And, there's also the matter of what happens to him even if he is eligible. I'm sure that this has not endeared himself to the coaching staff at all, this not being here, this process dragging out. So I think at this point, people that had Paris Ford in pencil as a starter or a contributor in the early part of this fall, I kind of think that ship has sailed. I think maybe you're looking at something like what Damar Hamlin did last season, where if and obviously he had a different situation. He was injured, but I think it's going to be the same thing. It'll be a mid-season decision on whether or not he plays this year, just because of the time he's missed and the reason that he's missed time. You don't like to hold an injury against a guy. Not being eligible is something that a lot of coaching staff will hold against a guy, and so whether he's here this week, next week, 2 weeks from now, I think it's at the point where you're looking at Paris Ford as maybe a later contributor than an early contributor when it comes to 2017.
All right, Alan Saunders, Pittsburgh Sports Now. Check in with us all throughout camp. We'll be doing Facebook Live from here on the South Side.